This is the GGJ Podcast, a show about the games industry, the people who make them, and the communities that grow up around them. I'm Susan Gold, a game education trailblazer and one of the founders of the Global Game Jam. Each week, we will be sitting down with a new guest, highlighting their own path and journey. This is a space for honest conversation from makers about creativity, collaboration, failure, and the messy, the beautiful reality of making games. So whether you're a young dev or seasoned, an educator, a student, or someone who just loves games and the people behind them, welcome to the GGJ Podcast. Take a breath, settle in, and let's hear directly from the makers themselves.
This episode is made possible in partnership with the Global Game Jam, the world's largest game creation event, bringing together creators from around the globe. A big thank you as well to the Global Game Jam's headline sponsors, Epic Games, Games for Change, and X-Sola, for helping make this creative community a reality. To learn more and to get involved in the upcoming jams, visit globalgamejam.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GGJ Podcast. Today, we have Lisette Titre Montgomery. She's an art director. She's a studio co-founder, and her career has spanned as long as mine. So it's rare that I get to meet other women in the industry that have loved games for as long as I have. And you started in the early aughts with titles like Freakstyle, and then you moved to major AAA franchises like Tiger Woods, PGA Tour, the Simpsons game, the South Park game, and Psychonauts 2. Now, Lisette is the co-founder and CEO of Cornerstone Interactive, where she's building cross-generational, narrative-driven games, speaking publicly about everything from AI to creativity and the future of game art. Over more than 2 decades, she's moved from character modeling, which was her start, to leading game art teams and mentoring emerging creators through her nonprofit and youth-focused programs. She's also been pushing for studio culture where artists can actually thrive. Today, we are going to trace Lisette's journey from seeing Toy Story and realizing computer animation could be her career through her defining projects and leadership roles. And today, we're going to talk about her accomplishments and how she's thinking about the future of the medium. We're going to find out what comes next for Cornerstone and what comes up next for Lisette. Lisette, welcome to the GGJ Podcast, and thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so glad you can make the time for us. For listeners who don't know you yet or haven't had an opportunity to interact with any of your work, how do you describe yourself today?
I would say my role and my specialty is that I lead teams through challenging visual concepts, and I lead them through execution and exploration. So anywhere from challenging visualization of elements of mental health, like I did in Psychonauts 2, to working on the first comedic RPG on South Park and how do you service an art studio and get the timing right on a joke. It's a bit challenging. And all the way to solving the pipeline problem that we've been working on at Gameheads, where we've developed our own curriculum and program that is now developing the next generation of game developers. So for me, it's looking at really hard, systematic visual problems and the ins and outs and the way that we solve those problems, from all the way from talent development to execution and shipping. That's my area of expertise. I like to make sure that there's a fastest, most healthy way to get beautiful pixels on the screen.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful pixels on the screen, or the combination thereof. What was the moment in your life where you said, I love this? I'm going to make this my living. Where were you? And had you always been a creative? Did you know you were creative?
I think I knew I was creative. That was just sort of what I gravitated to. I think as an introverted kid, it was the imagination, just peering into a book or a sketchbook is something that you just kind of naturally gravitate to. And so for me, that's where I think it started. I've always been drawing, I've been sketching. I used to get in trouble for drawing in the back of the Bible at church because that's kind of where my mind goes when if you give me some free time and a pencil. And so I always knew as an artist, I didn't really think about it as a career or a role until I was probably in high school. I thought, well, maybe I'll go into becoming a photographer because my school had a photographer program. And then one day, in my senior year, a representative from Ringling School came by, and it was just the first beginnings of CG. And so we're starting to see the first, Jerry's Game and these really first animation shorts come out into the mainstream and Toy Story. And that's when I think my brain clicked. It was the mix of the left brain and the right brain being able to be creative and then also be able to use science and technology or to create meaningful content and tell stories. And then I think for me, that's when my brain clicked. It was the mix of the left and the right brain.
I love that. So let's take us to your first job. Was it Freakstyle?
It was actually interesting. I found that job off of Craigslist. And so I had just moved here with a PC that I built in 2 suitcases. And I left my daughter with my mom, and I was like, I need to go find work. And I saw a job offering on Craigslist for a 3D character artist, and that's what I wanted to do. So I trained for. And luckily, it was the first job that I got. My portfolio was good enough. And then I was just holding on for dear life ever since.
I know that feeling. Um, at that time, you find it off of Craigslist. There you are. What was the hardest part about those years? Were there other women in your team? What were the things that you found difficult at that time? And we're just talking 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was just 20 years ago, and there were very few women at that time. And luckily, I had my first studio with Stuart, Mary, this is a programmer, long-time game developer, was, take me under her wing. It's a common theme, I think, for a lot of women in the industry is we find a mother who take us under our wing and kind of guide us through from studio to studio. And Mary was that for me. And I found myself in a really friendly situation. So I think it was great for me. Page 44 was a healthy environment, and we were contracted by EA. So I wasn't necessarily inundated in my first job in like deep studio culture until I took my second role in Tiger Woods, where I actually got a job at EA. So I think it was a good way to get my feet wet in a safe space while also being able to touch areas of development that I may not have been able to at an EA. So I did some concept work, I did character modeling, I did some rigging, and I think that's what led me to being cross-disciplined and interested in that and led to me having art direction and leadership skills across disciplines.
How would you define in those early years? Because if I recall, it was before EA Wife. The deadlines, the portfolio pressures, what was life like?
It's like the boiled frog analogy. You're in it and you're just trying to keep your head above water while, the temperature around you is rising. And so in those situations, you keep your head down and work because that's how you're told to add value. But I think also as you age and grow your career, you realize that's not really what does it. You need to be a problem solver. So you start looking for areas where you can contribute outside of your, you know, named junior role. And I think for me, I took advantage of those moments in the pressure cooker to play around in other areas again. So being in character art, we one of the first departments to finish a little bit earlier, so I would spend those extra time not only, like, learning how to get my own content into the game and optimizing it, but then I'm also messing around with lighting and trying to make things look good with the character, working with cross-disciplinary teams like visual effects to get the character functioning and even adding my own content to move things forward. So you find ways to take advantage of the pressure cooker or you're cooked. There's
It's an
really no other
understatement,
option.
but yes, you truly are. So we all run into problems throughout our careers. In the early days, were there problems that you saw that you were like, if given the chance, I know how to rectify this? And then how did you present them to those higher ups? Because people don't like to know that they have problems, you know?
For example, I think when I was in Tiger Woods, I worked on the character creator team and we worked on generating all of the assets that were necessary for creating your own avatar. And there are obvious blind spots in being able to generate myself in the game was not possible. So rather than having the debate, I would just make the content and put it in the game. Argue with me about the free braids you got? No. Right. So for me, I just took initiative. And then when there was a necessary conversation, you have to find like the right lenses to have that conversation with that person so they don't feel attacked, but you're also saying from my cultural perspective or from my creative and technical perspective, these things are missing. So a lot of it is being able to have difficult conversations without coming off as combative, and that's a skill.
Yeah. That's a very hard skill to acquire. Most people come off like a bull in a china shop. So that subtlety is something that I only wish I had. When you think back at that point, there you were a junior, you're working on moving up. When did you realize you were actually a leader?
That's a good question. I think for me, leadership came through the perception of my ownership. So people would see me step in and take over or help out or pick up the slack. People respond to those who provide help without effort or very little effort. And so I think one of my strengths as a leader is that I see other people, and that builds a level of empathy. So if you're struggling, I see you. I'm not ignoring what's happening. I'm acknowledging it. Even if I don't have the bandwidth to help, I'm helping you find resources. So I think being a leader is empowering my team and seeing them in their struggles and where their process problems are happening and where they need technical help. And so I think for me, that kind of came from the team asking me to step forward. And I think that's a common theme. I'm an introvert and I wouldn't normally choose to be out front, but I keep getting dragged there. So here I am.
So here you are. And to be honest, you do it with such grace because I've seen you speak and I've seen your work product and just know that you are always striving for the best. Here you are at EA, Tiger Woods, you go on to South Park. At what point do you decide it's time to leave or it's time to move your role? When do you decide to do that? What are you thinking in what's happening in your life at that time?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's always a life lesson to learn when it's time to move on and like understand why you're holding on to something. Is it safety? Is it because it's familiar? Is it because you're afraid of what it's going to take to stretch to the next thing? And since the industry is so project based and so trend driven, you after every project, you're kind of like, where is my next, North Star? Where am I pointing the arrow? And so for me, after working on the sim, I can see, well, I had a stable opportunity for a career. I wasn't quite sure how the growth pattern would happen. And so I was always looking for growth. I'm always looking to stretch my skills. I'm always also looking for meaningful content. And so the opportunity to work on an irreverent property like South Park manages to stay relevant, but whether for good or for bad, they're going to say what they have to say, and to be able to figure out how to enable that process through pipeline and tools and resources seems like a very interesting challenge.
So you decide to move to Double Fine at some point, and there are you the creative director, or did you start as an artist first?
I started as the art manager. So I came in managing the art team, organizing schedules, studio, also driving direction. So I was really functioning as an art director. And then in the middle, like maybe a year or two in production, my role was changed to art director.
Now that's a totally different kind of studio, moving from the corporate EA kind of there are hundreds of people and a parking lot to a smaller studio where it's much more of a family. How did you gracefully move into your role without you feeling like you didn't know what you were doing? What was going through your mind at that time? Where are we in your career? And and are you happy that you made that change also?
Yeah, I'm happy that I was able to work at a super creative studio like Double Fine. For me, it confirmed around some of the processes and methodologies of how I want to work. because I was able to lead that team through like creative challenges around very sensitive topics and being able to do that in a graceful way and also to technically build a team structure that's able to execute in highly experimental ideas.
So, what's going on in Psychonauts 2? And what was it there where you thought, I love leading art teams?
Yeah, I think the fun and challenging part of leading Psychonauts 2 was the very experimental concepts that we had to very quickly, rapidly prototype. I was able to work with production to restructure the team so that we were more of a pod-based structure. So we are no longer in department silos, which is just not how Double Fine works. I was able to convince production that we probably need to kind of restructure the team around a pod where there's a mix of disciplines, engineering, artists for characters, concept artists, a level of designer, so that we can actually say, Tim wants to do this very experimental, weird mental moment. How can we put this together really quickly? How can design prototype functionality while art is also figuring out, how are we going to execute on this very unique style for this specific character's brain, for example? So a lot of that was figuring out like how do you get a cross-functional team to execute really quickly and make decisions quickly and autonomously, which is the opposite of how it was originally set up, which is very micromanaged, big studio style with silos. So that transition was a little bit bumpy, but once we were able to prove that it worked on an E3 demo for 2019, it was really very successful, got a lot of awards and mentions, and really helped bring awareness to the product and buzz. We were able to roll that off across the team. So a lot of my work is looking at process and structure, in addition to giving an overarching vision of what the game should look like and how all those components need to be executed to fit together. So I rely heavily on my technical leads in those situations. And thankfully, I had some really strong ones like Jeff Solis and Zach Bahara was an amazing animator. And Rusty was, a longtime character lead. So those kind of really strong leadership structures underneath me helped lead in both areas.
And when you're building all of these things, what are the things that you're looking for? Are you looking for specific skill sets? Are you trying to, like you're in a kitchen and you've got this chemistry going? How do you make sure that all of a sudden you don't put in a bad baker?
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy, right? When you're in a kitchen, you can't have too many people in the pot, and if you put in the wrong ingredient, it could make everything taste sour, right? And so a lot of that is when making sure you have the right chefs in the kitchen with you. And then after that, it's making sure you're putting in the right ingredients and figuring out what the recipe is before you get there. So it's really like, what are all the things that make this specific brand or this IP unique and those pillars and all the elements that we add into that game, reinforcing those pillars or are we distracting from them? So a lot of it is defining what the artistic vision is and saying we're in somebody's mental world and their mental problem is that they are a recluse and they don't want to leave the house. So how do we visualize that, right? How do you make you feel claustrophobic in a space? And so we work with level designers to figure out how that space can work and do some like Euclidean hallway. And then I work with the art team to say, okay, well, how do we make this Euclidean space work as a visual element? So now you're kind of moving through an endless hallway that turns into a cake because the cake now has layers, right? And so where does this cake take you? Okay, well, if I go through this little Euclidean hallway, then I end up at this precipice where I see the environment that I'm now in. And so you're building the story while you're testing the elements that need to come together for that story, and then it all comes together. Then you tie that in with timing and narrative and cinematics. So it is like this constant cooking. Everyone's adding to the pots, and you hope somebody doesn't get sour.
Yes, and we've seen that happen. But you've spent a lot of time mentoring. You mentor a lot of young people and you speak to students on a regular basis and you talk about tech and games. Do you try to tell them what the secret sauce is? How do you describe preparing and being able to work in a creative industry And especially when your mind is young and you don't believe that anybody should stop your imagination.
It's a process. And but the first thing we tell them is there's no secret sauce. The secret sauce is you work your ass off. There's just no other way around it. And you show up and you show up for other people. And so that's kind of, I think, why we have such a strong program. People know that they're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And they know that they have to learn how to work together in order to get there. And they learn that from a young age. We start with a lot of our students from 15, and they stay with us till they're at college at 24, 25. We can't get rid of them. And I think that that's a testament to the fact that they know that they are getting practical studio skills. They're building games year over year. They're getting mentorship and support. They're getting wraparound services like we help you get into college and college prep. And so we're not just an after school program, we're really a community service. And
Why don't
it
you do a little
works.
plug for it as well? Because everybody should know that you built something and you have helped your community. That is also one of the things that makes you so special, is that you see immediate needs in work and day-to-day life, but you also can see other things in the community that needed help and were there. So go ahead.
Yeah, Gameheads Oakland.org is an organization that we have been part of for 12 years, since 2014, where we created a gaming accelerator for Oakland underserved youth, low income youth. So it's a free all year program where we train them with industry professionals on how to create their games in the winter and spring semester. And then their summer semester, they do an intensive where they build their first demo and or their next demo, where we have a huge showcase where we invite industry professionals out to demo their games at the end of the summer. And then we release them on HIO and other platforms in the fall. And we do this year over year, and our students come back year over year. And now we're working on placement programs where we have pipeline programs with Sony, we have Ubisoft, we had a pipeline program with Activision as well. So now our students are getting hired at studios like ILM. 20 students got placed in Sony last year. And so for us, it's educating and serving your community with the best of the game industry and essentially teaching the next generation to work how we want them to work and to work together. And that's extremely hard to find these days as a team that knows how to work together. And it's happening at an interesting time when we're having so many HB1 visa problems. So we're seeing more increased demand for our students because not only are they learning how to work properly in a studio environment, they also are gaining like industry level skills. So it's been a really wonderful program to develop. And now I'm growing my own studio so that I can hire them because I've already taught them how to work. And so now I need to pay them.
Well, I think that is a great leading to, you finding your own space and creating your own studio. You, from your vantage point, you saw all these structural barriers for young people, and that you decided to actually help is one of the things that is so admirable about you. I truly feel like there need to be more programs like this. I only wish I could have the bandwidth to do something like that here in Chicago, but I can see this being in every urban area. Especially, I have a friend in Argentina who works with children who are in prison and they are illiterate, and he's teaching them how to code and make games. And I just think there are so many underserved communities that just no one is taking the time, and these are things that could help eliminate future issues like, being able to find a job or having the right skill sets. But the one thing I think that you're giving them that games gives people is that an opportunity to hear a whole bunch of different ideas, and that they're all good and that they all can be shared. That's just an amazing thing. And then as you starting to build Cornerstone, why was it that you decided to do that? Was it something that you weren't seeing in other studios? I mean, at what point do you decide I need to do this myself? That's a lot of a headache.
Yes, transitioning from an art director to a CEO has definitely been a very steep learning curve, but I think I am the better for it. I think Me and my partners, the co-founders, all came to a point in our careers where we felt like it was time. My partner, co-founder Raymond Graham and Marcus Montgomery, and myself were also board members for Gameheads, and we all grew that program together. So we knew that we could grow a process-driven system with an educated workforce that also can grow and scale. So not only is Gameheads Oakland in Oakland, it's nationwide, and we have a chapter in Hawaii and all throughout the Hawaiian Islands. So we are able to build from literally nothing to a $2 million nonprofit with the help of Damon Packwood, our executive director. So we felt like this was the next step for us. It's like we know how to build a workforce, we know how to build teams. Raymond Graham is the former director of platform graphics at Unity. So he's literally the person you send around the world to solve your graphics problems. And Marcus Montgomery just recently left Microsoft. He was a design director leading the production team, so leading design across multiple products in the AAA space. So for all of us, we felt like we were heavy hitters. We had to reach the top of where we could go in the studio systems, and that our workforce was ready. So really, the only problem we need to have is we need money. We solved the hard part. Just need money.
So you've created now Cornerstone. What is your first project and what are on your list of things you want to do as a studio founder?
I think we started in Cornerstone with a question of how do we make games the way that we want to? And for me specifically, how do we make games the way artists want to? And so when I got off of Psychonauts, I needed to decompress. I was really burnt out and I just didn't want to even touch a computer for a while. But I wanted to be creative and I knew that would be a healing space for me. So I went back to what I originally loved, which was clay. And so I started building and sculpting clay maquettes and characters throughout my time off. And I just fell back in love with the process. It's just getting your hands dirty and smelling the feel of the clay and then forming a character and a personality just really appealed to me. And I thought, like, why am I not doing it this way? Why am I still doing everything in the computer? And then right around the same time, you're seeing all these new AI tools come online. You're also seeing things like your phone is now something as simple as your phone is now able to do a very detailed LiDAR scan. Tech adventures that cost tens of thousands of dollars are now in your pocket. And I thought this is the time for me to reimagine what creating looks like, not just for myself, but also the people that I educate. How can we change the inputs to be more intuitive instead of, picking up a stylus and picking up a blob of clay. And I found that the process is actually faster. I could build a character in a week or two and have it scanned in and moving with the help of Mixamo and auto rigging and tools, much faster than my previous processors where I had to build a character and get it all set up. And that was a 4 to 8 week process. Now I can get something in and very, very representative and has a lot more soul than what I was doing previously. And so we started doing a lot of testing and tools on these new and emergent tools that are coming online, focused on ethical and open source. So we're doing animation with Mixamo. We're starting to test inputs like Move AI, where you are using your own body to do first block out. You still need an animator to center and push the bounds of animation. And we're also looking at tools like Cascader, which is a really promising tool for doing keyframing and leveraging motion capture. But we are all focused on leveraging what creativity looks like and giving control to developers and designers. I think the way that AI is being sold is sells data centers, but that's not how it's actually going to play out.
So you spoke a little bit about AI. When did those tools start to feel more real to you as a part of your workflow rather than as a science fiction idea?
So they don't feel real to me as of yet because they're not ready for production. They feel like experiments, which is where we're at. Everybody right now is trying to define a moving target. That's from the technical standpoint all the way to even legally. You're even seeing the ball constantly moving when it goes to litigation. So everyone is trying to figure out where they're going to land. I think for us, we're always focused on artists and creativity first. And so we're always going to use AI how we've always used AI, which is, We've used it for defining pathing. We've used it for muscle deformation and machine learning. And this is for decades. We've been using AI in that way. It's always been used as a way to enable and empower creators. And that's how we will also use it ethically.
Do you feel there's an ethical line that's very clear, or is it still just like you said, moving target, and nobody has an idea of what's actually ethical or not?
I think there is an ethical line, and there's also a legal line. And the two words that hinge on this ethical is human authored. And so that is the two words that the Copyright Office will not budge on. On good authority, they will not budge on those two words. So anything that is not human authored will not be able to be trademarked and copywritten. That is also where I think the ethical line is. If you are using an artist's work to generate content, you should be paying that artist because you're generating it from human authored content, and that human who authored it should be compensated. And if you're going to be generating your own LLMs with your own work, then, you should be owning that work and getting paid if other people choose to generate from that work. And so for me, it's cutting the artist out, devaluing the artist, essentially saying, "We're just trash you could throw away." And that's a lot of the language that I'm hearing is, 1, not true, and 2, just very toxic. It's more of this ask for permission later BS that a lot of these VCs do, and it just shows a very deep lack of understanding of how games actually come together and work.
No, I kind of like that definition. That human authored piece is something that resonates with me, and I like that. Um, what kind of new roles do you think are going to start to come about, and especially for artists and art teams? What type of thing do you think as is there going to be an ethicist involved in development? What are the roles that you think we should start training for, or core skills that students should be thinking about?
These are conversations that we've had that not just as a studio, but also as board members and teachers at Gameheads, is how do we best prepare the next generation of developers to utilize these tools if necessary without them becoming a crutch. And I think what the problem is right now is that we're seeing a huge crutch. You're seeing the limitations and the reduction in cognitive support and over reliance on AI. And we are also really focused on how do we make sure that our students are empowered by using it? Are they generating their own agents so that they can control how the tools are working? Those are the conversations that we are having. And for us, is if you don't know how to fix the thing, then you shouldn't be building the thing. If you can't reverse engineer something, you don't know how you've actually built it, then you haven't really built the muscles that you need in order to build something properly. And so for us, we're focused on, 1, building things properly, and then allowing the tools to support us with efficiency, or giving our students or learning how to run agentic AI so that we are controlling the exact parts of the process that we want to, and using automation where we get the most benefit, while also not screwing with that human authored fact, because that will get you in some legal trouble, right? So those are the balances that I think we're finding right now as we're all sort of defining a moving target while also trying to do it ethically.
So, do you see Cornerstone 5 years from now being the kind of place where artists are thriving?
I think that's where things are absolutely going. If you look at the arc of where CG art and 3D art is, I started at the very genesis of it. The first Toy Story came out the year I graduated from high school, and I immediately became involved. And I developed, you know, across multiple platforms and tools. I've been in 14 different engines as an artist. So you start to see where the trends are going. And so for me, I think what we're actually going to see is a huge appetite for original content in reaction to this regurgitated art that you're seeing come from AI. It only can do what it consumed, right? But it's going to create a huge appetite for original art, and especially handmade art. You're seeing that coming up in the marketplace. Games like South at Midnight that have a handmade style. Midnight Walk just came out. There's a huge amount of rewards, and everything in that game is handmade. Harold Halibut is a great game that also as a stop motion style. And then you're seeing a lot of, social media and transmedia properties like Tiny Chef blowing up. So people are looking for authentic handmade content. We just need more efficient ways to create it and more intuitive inputs in order for artists to have more control. So I think it's more of an opportunity for our UGC communities, for example. If really talented miniaturists can scan in all of their little, dollhouse toys, I would rather have that in an Unreal environment than a bunch of randomly generated props from an AI generator that has a mixed and uncontrollable style that I doesn't really create a visual language, right? So we're going to start seeing this like this bifurcation of these very AI slap, low value, low quality content, which is filler, and then you're going to see really original creators and the tools that they need developed. And then you're going to start seeing people looking for very specific content creators and moving away from mass media. So I think that's why you're seeing all this consolidation right now.
Oh,
So it's going to be very interesting, I think, for Cornerstone as we are navigating this new technical landscape. We were always going to be on the side of what is going to be the most creative and original process, because that's what people are going to emotionally connect with. Because at the end of the day, our customer is still a human being.
I want to follow that up with a question about preparing yourself for the next 5 years as a company and as a leader and trying to design these particular opportunities for growth. How do you prepare yourself? What are you doing to make yourself ready?
Mhm. I think we're at a point in time where we're at a new epoch, as they call it, where you see 25 years of instability and then you see 80 years of like technical advancement. And so we're coming off of the last height of technical advancement, and now we're at another epoch, and AI is creating that instability. So for the next, hopefully less than 25 years, you're going to see a lot of overturn, a lot of unrest, and a lot of technical advances and devolution happen. And I think that the way you prepare yourself is to one, center your health and mental health, and then also try to find out what your North Stars are with everything becoming so unstable, insecure, everything's upside down. All you could do is find that peace within yourself and your North Stars and hold on to your values and what's important to you, and everything else you don't have any control over. So for us, we know what our North Stars are as a company and what we're willing to support. And anything that falls outside of that, we're just going to ignore.
So, as we wrap up this conversation, how would you say you've evolved over the past 20 some odd years? What is the next thing you're looking forward to?
I would say that I've evolved in as a leader, and I've evolved as a person who has become comfortable being upfront and speaking up and supporting my community. And I think that that comes from a developing understanding of my values and who I am here for and my purpose. And I think that that's never going to change. And so for me, I'm always focused on what can I achieve this day? And how can I express myself? What stories can I tell? How can I execute on this really great character? So, for example, it's always figuring out a way to tell our stories and express yourself, and to do that with grace and empathy and to help those around you.
Well, that is truly evolved. And I am so glad that you have given us your time, and I truly appreciate it. I am so looking forward to seeing what Cornerstone is going to create for us. And I am looking forward to being a part of your future journey. I thank you so much for your time today, and I truly am loving what you're saying. It really resonates inside, and I hope that other people hear you as well and understand that the future is not terrible for artists. The future is for us to define. And I'm very happy to be in that same place with you. Thank you so much, Lizette.
You too.
Thank you.
Want to get involved with the GGJ podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Please send your ideas, suggestions, and questions to ggjpod@globalgamejam.org and tell us who you think we should be talking to next, what stories or issues matter most to you about the future of games, and help us highlight the people and practices that make a sustainable creative life in games possible. Thank you for spending time with us on the GGJ podcast. If this conversation sparked something for you, please share it with someone who might find it useful. And don't forget to follow along so you never miss new stories from makers around the world. You can find more episodes, resources, and information about the Global Game Jam at globalgamejam.org. Catch us on Substack and on YouTube and anywhere else you find podcasts. This has been the GGJ podcast. Thanks for listening and keep making games.